Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today I will be talking about the books that will self-destruct by the end of 2023. So this is a video that has been going around on BookTube and I thought it would fit me very well. In my goals video I talked about wanting to reduce my TBR to 50 books. But even more than the amount of books on my shelf, I want to reduce the time they spend on my bookshelf. Ideally, I would like to read the books I have within about 6 months to a year, because I've noticed that if they are on my bookshelves longer, either I lose interest in them, or I'm not as excited about them anymore, or I do still want to read them and I just get annoyed with myself because I haven't picked them up yet. So the idea of these books will self-destruct is that you take a number of books and you put a time limit on when you want to read them, and if you haven't read them by that time limit, you have to unhaul them. So what I did is I looked at all the books I had on my TBR and I picked all the books that have been on my TBR since before 2022. There are 17 books on this list and I can sort of divide them into two categories. The first category are all ebooks. I have mentioned before that I have a subscription to a Dutch indie publisher, and for 50 euros a year I get sent all the books they published on ebook. So these are all books I haven't actively picked out, so naturally there are always going to be books that I am less interested in, but then also some of my favorite Dutch and Belgian authors are with this particular publisher, so there's also some really great books on that list. So I'll just go through them. I have my notebook here where I've written down all my unread books. So the first book is the nieuwe koloniale leeslijst by Rasit Elibol. So this is a book where they have asked different people to talk about a book that they think should be on the reading curriculum. And they've done a couple of these surrounded by different themes, and this one is all about books from the former Dutch colonies. And I would still like to read this because it is basically a book about people talking about books, just BookTube in a book. Then we have Het Panzer van de Kreeft by Albertine Minor. This is a book by a Swedish author. I have read a short story collection by her previously, which I enjoyed but don't remember that much about now. So I'm not super excited about this book. I think it's one that I will just give a go and see if I like it. Next is Dit Alles by Postma. This is, I believe, an essay collection. I think I might just unhaul it straight away because I believe it's a book on parenthood, which is not necessarily something I'm interested in straight away. But if I do want to read on this topic, I think there's a lot of other people I would rather read writing about this topic. So I think I'll just unhaul it straight away. Then I have een nuchtere kijk op psychedelica by Michel van Elk, which is a non-fiction book on psychedelic drugs. Again, not something I might have picked out myself, but this could be interesting, so I am going to give it a go. Next is Liefde, grote stad by Song Park. This is also available in English and it's called Love in the Big City. When this came out a few years ago, quite a few people who read a lot of translated fiction were reading this. I think most people really enjoyed it, but I haven't really heard anything since. But it is a queer book in translation, so I would still really like to read this. Then we have had Personeel by Olga Ravn. This is also translated into English as employees or the employees. And I've seen a couple of people read it, and it's one of those books that everyone seems to have a bit of trouble explaining what it is actually about. It's like a weird little book in translation, and people either really love it or just don't get it. So yeah, I am definitely still interested in reading this and see on which side I land. And then the last ebook I have is Sanda by Pieter Huybrechts, and this is a non-fiction sort of true crime kind of book about a young man who wanted to join a fraternity, and during, I don't know what this is called in English, but this sort of ritual when you join a fraternity where you have to do all these crazy, oftentimes dangerous things involving a lot of alcohol, to be allowed to join in this fraternity. And this young man died because of the things he had to do. Again, a book that could be really interesting, but I'm always a little bit careful with true crime because I don't want it to be exploitative. But I've heard this one is pretty careful about that. So those were all the books I have on my e-reader still. Some of the books I do really want to read, some of them I'm not immediately interested in, but I am definitely still willing to give a go. But as a whole, if I don't read them by the end of the year, I'm not going to be super sad about them. But then the rest of the books are all books I have actively picked out. And I would be pretty sad if I hadn't read them by the end of the year, because all of these books are books I do really want to read. I have them right here because I put my TBR in order of when I got them. So here are my oldest books and there are my newest books. So let's see what we've got. The first one is Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. This one I have heard really good things about, and I do want to read more non-fiction on sort of popular science, health topics, and I think this one would be really good. Next we have Too Much Slip by Melissa Lukashenko. This is a book written by an indigenous Australian author, which won a lot of literary prizes when it came out. And I don't think I've read a book before with indigenous Australian characters, so I really look forward to exploring that topic in this book. Then we have The Street by Anne Petry. This is a modern classic written by a black woman. It's one of those books that everyone I see reading it ends up loving it and saying that the main character is one of the most memorable characters they have ever read. So I am really hoping to read this year. We have The Memory of Love by Aminatta Forna. I have read Happiness by this author, which was a book I really enjoyed. I think in topic this is going to be very different from that because it is a historical fiction set in Sierra Leone. But I know that I like her writing style, and I'm also hoping to learn a bit more about Sierra Leone's history in this book. Next we have Know My Name by Chanel Miller. This is a book I believe everyone has read, and everyone has said how well written this book is. So Chanel Miller was sexually assaulted on campus, and the person who assaulted her got a very light sentence, and she famously did a victim impact statement, which resonated with a lot of people. So I think this is going to be a pretty difficult book to read, but I've heard from so many people that her writing is really, really good. And I love reading memoirs, so it's about time I read this. Then we have Corregidora by Gayl Jones. This is another modern classic written by a black woman, like The Street by Petry. This is blurbed by both Toni Morrison and James Baldwin, so that in itself is enough recommendation. I think this is another book that's going to be pretty difficult to read. I think it is a lot about intergenerational trauma. Kim over at Middle of the Book March has put this on her favorites of last year. So another book I am really hoping to get to. Next we have my autobiography of Carson McCullers. I really like Carson McCullers as an author, so that made me pick this up. I think this is one of those books that sort of combines a biography of Carson McCullers, but also more a memoir of the author herself and her experience researching Carson McCullers' lives, especially some love letters she discovered between Carson McCullers and another woman named, I believe, Anne-Marie. So there is an element of queerness in this as well, which I think will be very good to read. Then we have This Must Be the Place by Maggie O'Farrell. I haven't read any of Maggie O'Farrell's fiction, but I do love her memoir, I Am. I don't know what this book is about, but I am looking forward to seeing if I like her fiction writing style as well. There is In the Kitchen, essays on food and life, which I think is very much what it says. I like food writing, so I think I will enjoy this book as well. And then last we have Disoriental by Negar. Davadi. This is one of those books that always keep popping up whenever Women in Translation Month rolls around again. So I picked it up just on the recommendation of that. Another book I would be really sad if I had to unhaul it. So those were all the books that are on my These Books Will Self-Destruct by the End of the Year list. Some of these books I would be really gutted to unhaul by the end of the year if I haven't read them, so I'm hoping this will just give me a kick in the butt to actually start reading them. So if there's any books on this list you have loved, please encourage me to read them, and then at the end of the year we'll see how I did. That's it for today. I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.